Welcome to a video tutorial on tools for graphing in Minitab Express. In this video, we're going to discuss bar charts constructed from data that was already summarized. Meaning the data was either tallied up and created in summarized totals in a column, or perhaps you have a two-way table. So the very first part is you're going to need data to do this. In this video, we do use pulse rates. And this was provided by Minitab Express. And then also from this data set that was downloaded, it was put into a spreadsheet. Certain functions were run on it that then produce summarized data. Today we're going to be looking at the participant running summary. In the study, they studied the effect of running on pulse rate. And so we're going to do that, and we're also going to be taking a look at whether those participants smoked or not in the context of how their activity level, whether it was a lot, a moderate, or a slight amount. In other words, did they exercise a lot, did they exercise moderately, or just slightly? And these are two forms of summarized data that we can then also put into a bar chart. So let's begin. The very first thing we're going to do is let's take the participant running summary, and we're going to do the running and the count. We're going to take a copy of that, and we're going to open up a blank spreadsheet in Minitab Express and just simply paste it in. So right now we have a run and a count. Now again, just as a quick note, you may be wondering where this data was obtained. If you want to practice with your own data, please look at the link below in the video details. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do graphs. So we're going to pick graphs. This example was done on a Macintosh computer. Minitab Express on a PC is very similar. So the menus might be in a slightly different place, but it has exactly the same functionality. We're going to pick bar chart. And our data right now is not counts of unique values in a categorical variable. It's actually summarized values for each category in a table. So we're going to pick option number 3 here. You'll notice it changes a little bit. In the context of this one, we have a simple count, a single column of values and a simple count. So we're going to pick that one. And it's going to ask us which one is the summary variable and which one is the categorical variable. First of all, if you're trying to figure out which is which, and you're trying to figure out which is identified as categorical versus other, categorical variable in Minitab Express has an icon that has little squares next to it. If it's a continuous variable, it'll look like an icon next to it will look somewhat like a distribution. So what we're going to do first is pick the summary variable. Summary variable is the actual count, so we're going to be looking at this. And we're going to highlight it and then press the right arrow to put the count into the summary variable. The categorical variable is the running status, whether the person ran or not in the study. And so we're going to click the right arrow, or we can double click, whichever is easiest for you. Double clicking or highlighting and then clicking the right arrow will accomplish the same task. Simply click OK. This will create a bar chart. Let's lower the spreadsheet a little bit so you can simply drag this down. That way you can reveal the entire bar graph. So let's see what we can do with this graph. So first of all, you can click on this graph. And when you do that, these elements come up. One is the graph layout and the other one is the graph elements. When you click on graph layout, you can adjust its orientation. Currently the bars are vertically oriented. You can also make them horizontally oriented as well. I'm going to keep it vertically oriented for this example. And then the other one what we can do is also change the individual components that are in the graph. So for example, the title is currently displayed. You can hide the title, but it's always good practice to have a title. You can add a subtitle, and I just put a check by there, and I can also add a footnote if I wanted to. And any one of these items, including the labels on the vertical axis and the horizontal axis, are editable. So for example, I can change this to count of people, of participants who ran. And you can change anything you want. And so that is kind of how that works. I'm going to remove the subtitle and footnote because I'm not using it in this particular example. But your example might require having a footnote or a subtitle. Okay, axis labels. What that does is it tells, well, let's turn it off and see the effect of taking off the axis labels. You notice that the horizontal axis and the vertical axis have lost their labels. You can also select whether to individually hide or not hide one of those. Tick labels will also do something similar. What you'll do is basically the labels of the scaling itself. That is what this controls. So if I hide it, both of those will disappear. And clicking on it again will make both of them appear. Likewise, you can still do the same thing over here where you can individually hide individual labels. A scale type. The scale type over here to default is the count. The percent would be representing the percent, and you'll notice now this will just change it, and you'll see it says percent of the count. This actually is now representing a percentage, and that value of 61.5385 represents 61.5385 of the participants who ran in this study. If we change the scale type back to default, you'll notice now it does a raw count where it says 56 people did not run. Let's look at those data labels. Now data labels, when you turn it on, will put the number of whatever is being tracked, whether it's percentage or the raw count, above. Or you can also make it above the bars, or you can put it inside the bars as well. From a visualization perspective, sometimes one option or the other may be preferred. I'm going to put it outside, or I can just simply turn it off. Grid lines over here, when you look at this, you can also put grid lines in the bar graph. That sometimes aids in visualization if you're trying to track what the quantities are. And lastly, when we look at reference lines are custom lines that you can put into the graph if you're looking for particular benchmarks or landmarks in your own study. So for example, suppose I wanted to put in a reference line at 50 and 30. And let's see what that does. So when I'm doing that, I'm going to click reference lines, and it says y-axis, it says enter values separated by spaces. So what happens is let's say I want to put 30, and then I'll put a space and then see what happens. When I put a space, notice it does draw a 30 and puts a red dash line there. Then I'm going to do 50 as well, and then if I push space, that will also include it. In order to just simply exit this mode, I would just simply click away from the box, and now the graph has been configured. Again, you can change any of these labels at any point. Lastly, let's say you find that you do not want to keep those lines in there. You can simply click back on it and remove the reference lines by simply backspacing over them, pressing a space bar. That will erase the reference lines without you having to redo your whole bar graph again. Last parts. If you want to export the graph, you have options to export as either a PDF or HTML. You can also do a right click, I believe. If you right click, you can also export it as any of your graphs as images, as either a PNG, which is a bitmap, or PDF format, or HTML if you're putting it on a web page. You can also do a copy, and that will put the image into the clipboard. And that was, if you're wondering how I did that, I did a right click or a control click on the graph itself. So you can copy any of these. So what we're going to also look at is, remember that anytime you create one of these graphical visualizations, it will create a corresponding table below. The summary statistics will pretty much match up with what you had over here. If you recall, it's just that it also now includes the percentage as well, and it does a full total count. Okay, what we're going to now look at is the other visualization when you have a two-way table. So for a moment, I'm just going to erase what we've done, the work that we've done here, and we're going to create a new chart. Now, Minitab never erases any of your old charts. You'll just create a second one, and you can actually look at old ones from before. Okay, so now let's take a look at another indicator. So we're going to go back to our data that we had earlier recorded in the summary. And this time what we're going to do is look at the relationship between smoking, whether it's a no or yes, versus a person's activity level, which was a lot, moderate, or slight. We're going to copy that portion right here. I'm going to highlight, I'm going to copy. I'm going to go back to Minitab and paste. Now let's see how this works. We're going to again create a bar chart. And this one is going to be based on a two-way table. We first want to change it so it's summarized data, so summarized value for each category in a table. And we're really looking at a two-way table that is clustered, so we're going to pick this option. It's going to ask us two questions. It's going to ask us for the summary variables, and the summary variables are the ones that are being measured. So in this case, we're looking at the columns. So the summary variables are those columns. They're going to be the ones we pick here. You can pick all three, you can highlight all three, and put the right arrow and it'll go right in. The next one we're going to do is the column of row labels. The row labels had to do with the smoking. Smoking was either a choice of no or yes, and I'm going to put that right here. Click OK. This will create the bar chart. And there we have a chart of a lot, moderate, or slight. So notice in here, case of smokes, it's either no or yes, no or yes, or no or yes. And here you have a lot, a moderate, or slight. What we can also do, similar to we did with the other bar chart, is we can also change its configuration. And we can, for example, maybe we would rather prefer it to be horizontally oriented, to see if we can find that more illuminating. We might also want to, in this situation, put down those data, let's see, we want to put down grid lines to make it a little bit easier to follow chart. So in this particular case, and then what we'd want to do is perhaps change what this was. This was actually the count, so we can change the name. Here, this is the count. And again, we could probably find a better description than a chart of a lot, moderate, slight. Smoking and activity level perhaps is a better name than we had. You really want to think about what you want to call it as a better name. And then when you're satisfied with it, you'll see what you can do is simply export it. To export it, we do control click or right click, and you can just simply export it to a bit image file. And then you just save it, and then you can now have a record of it. And again, as usual, this will also recreate the summary chart along with the percentages that are involved of each category as well. So it does recreate a two-way table, reporting out the counts, and also the percentage relative to the count in each category. So these percentages are taken relative to the count of 21. These percents are taken with respect to the count of 61 of the moderate group, and here the percent is taken with respect to 9 of the slight group, the slight amount of activity. That concludes this video tutorial. I hope you found this helpful.